of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristero. Chapter 146. Tomorrow never comes.
So, Shouta-kun, what have you got planned for this Saturday night, Juggling his hands busily restocking the bamboo cutlery station, the eatery owner slanted a knowing look at Atsuhiro and upped. If this is where you ask me if I'd like to swap patrols with you, Mr. Compress, then this is also the time when I flip you the bird. Oh, you won't, Missa! The brunette gasped, his hands somewhat wiping down the tables. Although I could use the company if...
Oh, you freeloading hack, you heard the captain! Rumi chastened with a tut, her athletic form stepping over to him so that she could snag the cloth and eco-friendly cleaning spray. And give me those. Honestly, with all the free food and treats you get here, want to kill you to clean up properly.
Ah, you're right, of course. The flamboyant teacher admitted, his features the epitome of mock remorse as he then sprawled across Dobby's favorite booth. But alas, I'm simply too lonely and wrung out of teaching to be of much use, you know. Pre-summer exam season might be stressful for my students, but oh, the marking of it all. He sighed. That and with Marai still being in Australia, it's so quiet in the apartment. You must feel it too, right, Shouta-kun? Especially since young Nato and the kiddos are out and about enjoying themselves without us. He continued, his head shaking ruefully. Gone are the days of them hanging off of her everywhere, eh? Wherever does the time go, Laugh, snorting at the slightly older man. The eatery owner rolled his eyes before he grabbed the small green elephant-shaped watering can he kept tucked beneath the contacts and connections corkboard to water the herbs on the service hatch's sill. That's what happens when kids grow up. He smiled. They're meant to be having fun together, away from bosses like us. And besides, after all of the tests, assessments, and evaluations they took last week, I think it's wonderful that they've all gone out to the pier. So, you don't feel betrayed that they're running about wasting money and buying the muck those alleged street vendors call food out there when you put your heart and soul into whipping up their favorite dishes morning, noon, and night? The waistcoat wearer gasped, his left hand pressing over his heart. You got that to me, you know. Chuckling, he shrugged his shoulders and looked over the wall in front of him. A wall that had once been peppered with their childish scrawls, drawings, and achievements that were too embarrassing to be shown now. However, he'd been allowed to keep the odd photo up, at least. Seeing them all grow up and move on to other interests was only natural, of course. Not that they didn't all still crowd around the study tables or enjoy their time at the Noroneko, but he knew that they wouldn't stay kids forever, and young adults had so much more to do these days, didn't they? I'm pretty sure that eating junk food is a rite of passage for teenagers, isn't it? He quipped through his snicker. Besides, you'd have a whole lot less work to do if you were actually doing it, instead of distracting yourself. I'd also have a lot less work to do if a certain trainee teacher wanted to get some experience by...
Okay, that's it. Come on, you. We're going to be late for our patrol. Rumi cut in, her crimson eyes rolling as she dropped off the cleaning supplies in their little cubbyhole next to the chilled display cabinet, and snagged the top hat wearer by the scruff of his dress shirt and pulled him from the booth. Laughing right along with Spinner and Ryuko, he even joined in as they waved him goodbye, the summer light of June just about dwindling between the sky rises looming overhead as 2100 struck. Locking up the cafe, Shouta let out a little sigh. Everything was as it should be. The gats were fine, his larder was stocked, and everywhere gleamed with cleanness. He should be feeling accomplished, shouldn't he? Humming to himself, he turned away from legacy he was building and walked towards the apartment complex where he lived, his phone fished out of his jeans pocket and in hand. The kids had tagged him and the other adults into some of the photos they were taking tonight, at least. They were having a great time from the looks of things, and were now trying to win a few more prizes before their 10 p.m. curfew kicked in, and they'd all flood Katsuki's spacious home for a sleepover supervised by the blonde's father. Having hosted a few sleepovers for the kids himself, he didn't exactly envy the usually quiet and reserved man his task of keeping tabs on the post-exam celebrating teens, all hopped up on sugar, video games, and the frenetic energy they seemed to generate between them. Not that his own group of friends weren't trying to get him involved in the action, too.
Grinning at the illuminated frontage of his phone, he chuckled to himself as Ingo texted him again to insist that he join her and the other women who made up the Frosted Irises team at their favorite izakaya sake bar. They were too kind to him, really. And it wasn't that he didn't want to join them, not at all. But they deserved their fun-laced relaxation time without a person who didn't drink sitting there and trying to play along, didn't they? It might be nice to have some company, though, mightn't it? Especially since Toshinori hadn't had the time to message him since yesterday. He could only imagine how swamped he must be with all of those delegates, deal-making meetings, and other concessions he had to make as one of the new International Hero Consortium's figurehead, and so not wanting to distract him, he'd send him a text before going to sleep. Yes, that'd be for the best, wouldn't it? Nodding to himself, his legs jogging him up the stairs towards the 7th floor, he resigned himself to a quiet evening of reading through his teacher training materials, a bubble bath, and maybe a few pieces of salty licorice. Collapsing onto the Western-style bed with a long-suffering groan, his gape bunching up and billowing around him, Yagi Aizawa Toshinori was starting to think that Mirai was right about letting some of the other younger heroes take the helm on this project. Not that he was old or anything. In fact, many of the people he was interacting with were older, weren't they? Sighing, he begrudgingly rolled over and stared up at the starkly white ceiling, the blinding light affixed there, doing little to ease his suffering. If the people he was trying to rally could see him now, they'd probably all pack up and go home, wouldn't they?
Come on, Toshi, up and at 'em,
he murmured into the too small room with its basic copy-paste furnishings that every room had in common. Slumming it was a grounding experience, at least. Almost as grounding as meeting some of his fellow heroes from economically underdeveloped countries and welcoming them. To think that there were still so many places in their vast, beautiful world where basic rights were restricted had broken his heart. That's why he'd insisted on staying, and on making some of the more famous, wealthy heroes stay, too, because these brave people who fought so hard for so little needed to be heard by people like them, people who wanted for nothing. For this collaboration of extraordinary people he was trying to band together shouldn't just be working on a way to thwart Shigaraki should he ever make a move. No! No! He was learning month to month and year to year that there were so many other evils that they should be tackling, and poverty needed to be one of them, regardless of some of the unified nations not wanting to share their resources. Even looking at the pros he worked with back home, he could see how vast numbers of them could bring water to areas facing drought, even more helping to reforest places devastated by wildfires, or to help to build better shelters and fly medicines to people living on the fringes of their societies. If he'd only realized that things were this bad sooner! If only he'd not been so fixated on All for One and protecting Japan for the majority of his career! But still, this was better late than never, and he bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. Blinking, his headache having cleared up some as he focused on the brighter picture he was building in his mind, he moved deft fingers to the hidden pocket at the small of his bodysuit's back to smile at his lock screen before flicking to his messages. Yagi Aizawa Shouta.
Hey, I just wanted to check in before heading to bed. Have you had a good day?
Yagi Aizawa Toshinori.
Ah, kitten, I have so much to tell you. You wouldn't believe some of the headway we're making.
He typed back, his left hand rubbing at his eyes as he contemplated whether or not it'd be worth it to strip out of his costume now or to sleep in it. He'd be showering and changing tomorrow morning anyway, wouldn't he? Yagi Aizawa Shouta.
I'm all ears. I could call you if you like.
No, he needed to get changed and washed up now, didn't he? He'd promised to spar with 5 of the fresh-faced up-and-comers at 5:30, hadn't he? Yagi Aizawa Toshinori.
I'd love nothing more, Shouta. Just let me take a quick bath and I'll call you, all right?
He responded, his heart fluttering a little. He really wished that his husband could be here. He would have loved for him to be a part of this process. However, he couldn't pull him away from the cafe for such things, especially since Eraserhead had become an underground pro not affiliated with any agency to avoid the limelight. Yagi Aizawa Shouta.
That's great. Speak soon. I love you. I love you more, kitten.
he murmured to the quiet of the room, his hands then placing the device onto the small pine bedside table after he shoved the charging jack into its port, his shoulders rolling languidly as he got up and walked the few steps it took him to reach the tiny yet serviceable bathroom. Tomorrow, he just knew, was going to be another good day where he'd get things done and be one sunrise closer to holding his husband in his arms and telling him how much he admired him in person. Checking his phone 4 more times before curling into the lonely expanse of the huge futon he and his lover shared, Shouta tried not to feel snubbed. Knowing his husband, he'd have bathed, gotten progressively sleepier, and just slumped into bed. He'd always envied how quickly the other could lose himself to slumber. That had altered somewhat after New Eden opened its doors to the world, though, hadn't it? That's why he wouldn't begrudge him this. He'd be home soon anyway. For a while.
You sound like a lovesick sap, Aizawa.
He muttered to himself, his eyes rolling, before he switched off the overhead lamp he'd had installed for reading, before closing his eyes and fighting the insomnia that he'd not had to struggle with since his ward's nightmares had abated, and they'd grown out of them for the most part. Who'd have thought that he'd ever become so, as young Katsuki had once said, lovey-dovey? Laughed snorting to himself, he rolled over, grabbed Toshinori's pillow, and held it close, his body sagging into the bedding as he tried to think of other things. Tomorrow was another day. Another day that was already here. Another day closer to him being able to cuddle with his husband as opposed to this poor substitute, and then, so long as their friends and community didn't mind, he'd proposed that they have a proper family day with NATO next Sunday. It'd be nice for them to just ditch their phones and go out somewhere, wouldn't it? Maybe they could go hiking and stop in at the Wild Pussycat Base for a barbecue with them and Kota. Or perhaps a day trip to Tokyo would be good. At any rate, he was certain they could come up with something, couldn't they? Huffing awake, Shouta stretched away from the pillow he curled around before sitting up to stare at the glaring red numbers of their shared alarm clock, his lips puffing at his eye. There's no rest for the wicked, Itsu-san used to sneer at him as his child self scurried around the care center trying to get the younger boys dressed and fed, whilst she took a piss in the shared bathroom and sauntered back to bed. He'd not thought about her in a long time, had he? He'd be sure to call his care center siblings later for a catch-up, just to see how they were doing. They came by the cafe a great deal, sure. But it had been a month or 2 since they'd just hung out, hadn't it? Nodding to himself, his fingers reaching for his phone, he tapped away a reminder on his notepad, his eyes looking at some of the orders he needed to make on Monday, plus his notes. For Denki, Hitoshi, and Izashi's birthdays with Izuku's to follow, before he pulled himself out of bed with a stretch. Then, his usual katas done, he jogged to the bedroom's ensuite, washed himself down, tied his hair up with Hello Kitty bubble he adored so much, and re-entered the bedroom proper to throw on his black shorts, t-shirt, and sneakers. He couldn't count how many times his husband had tried to slip All Might branded running shoes and tracksuits into his running gear. The lovable ham. Laughed snorting to himself, his eyes rolling, he affixed his phone's bicep carrier before grabbing up the cellular device and opening the group chat he shared with the study group. Cat then!
So, who's up for a run this morning?
Chuckling, he watched as a few of them came online. Thunderbolt. Zzz. Rock solid. Why you like this, Shoni? Icy hot. I'd love to come, Shoni, however. Izuku is still fast asleep and he starfished himself over my sleeping bag and I don't want to wake him. Sugar Man has uploaded an image. Blinking, a laugh escaping him, Shouta shook his head as Rikito appeared in a selfie with Shouta lying ramrod straight, with the emerald-haired boy in his All Might jammies blissfully snoozing atop him, whilst Eiichiro offered a thumbs up and wink in the background. Various other sleep-laden limbs, blankets, and pillows also peppered the scene, too. Such good kids. Cat Dad.
Say no more. Shall I see y'all for breakfast later?
Thunderbolt. Praise be to the pulpit pancakes. Icy hot. I would definitely move Izuku for your lemonade. Failing that, I'll carry him over. Rock solid. Oh, can you carry me too? Sugar Man. I'll get everyone to the cafe by 8:30, Show-senpai. I found a great new recipe for an omelet I'd love to make for you.
Grinning and snickered to himself, he closed the group chat, affixed his phone to its cradle, grabbed his keys, and prepared to head out into another flawless June morning. His head filled with thoughts about all of the tomorrows he could plan for whilst doing his morning patrol route. Life, despite its little bumps along the way, was pretty damn good, wasn't it?